Welcome to the Life You're Made For with me, Dr. Heather Penny. We're going to be having conversations that talk about us spiraling up versus spiraling down, because we all want to be living lives that are about thriving, not just surviving. This is the life you're made for. So let's get going. Hello, Dr. John Harris. So good to have you on our show here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Dr. John and I are great friends, and we've served on boards together, and we both are in the leadership, coaching, and consulting world and field. So we love talking about ideas and thoughts together. And so, of course, I said, you got to come on my show. More importantly, you are a huge endorser for Grace Space. And I think you're getting the reputation with my team as being a super endorser because of how you're using it in your work in your field. So that's really what our conversation is going to be around today. But I think before we jump into that, tell our listeners a little bit of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, first again, thanks for having me here on this podcast. Such a fun thing to do, because I love your book, and so I like promoting and endorsing things that I use and things that I know work for other people. So that's kind of where that comes from. I have no issue with that at all. It's a pleasure. And I mean, that ties into because of what I do. A big part of being an executive leadership coach and corporate trainer is because I saw in my own life, a gap between how I was actually showing up and impacting people, versus how I intended. Like this huge gap between my intentions and my impact.
Yeah.
And at first I began to watch that as a chaplain in the military, an advisor for commanders, and being able to see how their leadership impacts their unit, and being an advisor for morale issues or other things like that, and seeing, man, okay, they intend to do this, but this is how people are perceiving them. So then when I stepped into leadership roles in myself and started seeing some symptoms of that a blind spot was present, I thought, wow, this is crazy. People are experiencing me different than how I actually intend. So how do I discover that? How do I fix it? How do I make a place where it's my intention for people to be in an environment where they feel safe and where they can thrive and bring their best and be fulfilled in what they're doing? And there were things popping up in my leadership behaviors and leadership habits that are actually sabotaging that. So that's how I got started with being interested in emotional intelligence and transformational leadership. And when I saw how it transformed my own leadership, my own awareness, my own relationships, where I was able to build trust in spaces where I didn't know I lost it.
Oops.
Yeah, I thought everybody thought that I was amazing as I thought about myself, and so, and seeing where, even though I thought I put my best foot forward, I was losing some credibility in how I was negatively impacting people. So when I saw that, and there was a sensitive spot in my heart towards how other leaders could be experiencing this in other areas of society, not just in military, not just in church, but also in businesses and in county roles. So I served Health and Human Services. I served administrators in school districts. And I'm like, man, if I can help them close the gap between the intentions and the dreams in their heart and the reality that they're facing and the impact that they're making, man, I can really help the bottom line in these agencies and organizations increase their impact. So that's where my passion came to do this work and helping leaders with emotional intelligence, transformational leadership, which there's a lot of overlap there. You can't be a transformational leader without having emotional intelligence.
Or let's just say an authentic transformational leader.
Correct. Yeah, and well, that's why I like your book so much, because my approach to this is not trying to act like somebody at work that you're not really. That's not really who you are, because people see through it. I don't want people to feel like they can go to a workshop on empathy and to come away being more empathetic. That's not how it works. Like things like empathy, things like compassion, they have to really come from your heart.
Right.
And so my approach to helping these leaders shift is dealing with the hard issues, not dealing with just some
Mm-hmm.
skills. And so how do we authentically create space for yourself and for
Mm-hmm.
others? And then that's why when you came out with your book, I'm like, oh, sound the alarm. Sound the alarm. There is a tool you can
Good.
use. The language is there, the practical tips are there,
Yeah.
and you can apply these. But it helps you look at your heart, though,
I love
right?
that.
That's one of the things I like about your book. I mean, getting to the heart of the matter,
Yeah.
because that's where people actually change.
That's awesome. Yeah, right on. And of course, I'm so curious as you were talking because I didn't know this about you, and we're friends, but I was like, really? I didn't know that there was a significant shift with you, and I have to go there now. But
Yeah.
what was your wake up call for your EQ or your emotional intelligence or recognizing the gap? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, when I first start off with clients who bring me in to do a workshop series, I share this story. So
Mm,
as I mentioned, as a chaplain, I was able to watch and observe commanders at different levels. A squadron commander who might oversee 200 to 300 people, maybe 400. A group commander, a wing commander overseeing an entire base of 15, 20,000 people. So I've been able to not just observe their leadership, and what affects their decisions and how the decisions affect other people and the morale of an
mm-hmm,
entire base or a unit. And so that's where I first saw the gap. That's when
mm,
I first saw how a leader, because I'm sitting in the meeting, right? How a
mm,
leader says, this is the change we're going to make. This is why. And this is how I expect people to begin to see me as a leader because of
mm-hmm,
this change I'm making, because of an impact that I'm
mm-hmm,
desiring to make to improve some things.
mm-hmm,
Well, as a chaplain, I'm not only in that meeting, I'm also walking the floor with people
mm-hmm,
on the front lines. Hey, how are y'all doing? What's your process? What do you think about this new change? Oh, I
mm-hmm,
can't believe this new change is happening. I hate it. Like there's this gap, right?
mm-hmm.
Between what the leader intended and how it actually is showing up and being experienced by people on the front line. Not only that, but I saw the gaps in leadership blind spots.
Mm,
How a leader's weakness that they cannot see
mm.
is wreaking havoc on their team and wreaking havoc
Yes.
on the unit.
Yeah.
And being the chaplain,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a person who they can talk to and everything is confidential.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they don't like necessarily oversee me. So there's no risk of me saying, hey, you got a problem, ma'am, sir. Do you know
Yeah.
that when you do this, this is what's happening? And I don't
Wow.
think you intend that to happen. So I was able to
Yeah.
see the realities of blind spots. So then I got out of the military, began working at a
Mm-hmm.
church, and I was overseeing a team of about 25 people. The church had about 1,500 people, and so I thought, you know what? All the leadership training I received in the military, oh, I know how to lead. Right? They're going to love my leadership,
You're
and
welcome.
I'm going to have this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm going to have this open door policy, and I want people to know I'm available. They can come talk to me. And so months go by, and I'm having this open door policy, and not one person is using this open door policy.
Mm,
And I thought to myself, because of what I've seen,
yeah.
I know the symptoms of a leadership blind spot. There's something that I have a leadership blind spot here
Mm-hmm.
because a reality that I'm expecting to happen is
Mm-hmm.
not happening.
Mm,
So there's a gap between what I believe and what people are
mm-hmm.
experiencing. So I sent out a survey, a 2-question survey, and to all 25 people, it's all anonymous. And I said,
Mm,
what are 3 things I do that help our relationship? And what are 3 things I do that hinder our relationship?
mm.
And I got some feedback.
The joys of feedback, huh?
look, look, first of all, I don't recommend sending it to 25 people. Um, but you know what? I
Mhm.
valued the feedback
Mhm.
so much. I valued
Mm,
finding out what that blind spot was. What is that
mm.
gap? So much that I put myself out there. And I was okay with it. It was so helpful to me. It helped me learn how to
Wow.
shift, what questions I need to ask for clarity.
Mhm.
And some shifts were not major shifts. I just
Mhm.
needed to reframe what I was doing a little differently.
Mhm.
For example, people come to me with a great idea they have, and I start asking question after question after question. Well, they were experiencing that as me shooting their idea down. My intention was to get some have them think through some things that would be
Mm-hmm.
successful.
Right. Right.
So I got the reputation of, man, don't bring your ideas to John because he's going to
Wow.
shoot it down.
And it's not your intent at
So
all. It was the opposite, right?
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
what I learned when I learned how I was being perceived, I learned to go, when people came to me with an idea, hey,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great idea. Let me affirm it first. That's a great idea. Do you mind if I ask you some questions that can help it be even more successful?
Just a tiny tweak.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Right. So
Yeah.
some changes you don't need to go through therapy for, although
Yeah.
that's not bad. If it's necessary, do it. But some
Right.
changes, if you just become aware of it,
Right.
you can make a tweak.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you what, that turned the whole thing around. Months later, I had to work more offsite because people were coming in my office with all kind of stuff. They wanted my feedback. The trust was built, the credibility was built. I was able to
Wow.
tweak it because I saw the gap and saw how I can close that gap between what I intended and the impact that was happening and turn it
Wow.
around. That's why I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
So I learned how to create
Mm-hmm.
gray space when I learned what it was that I was doing that was diminishing people and that
Yes.
was making the space not safe. And people
Mm.
don't see it because they judge themselves on their intentions, which are usually pretty
Mm-hmm.
good, and they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
evaluate the impact.
Right.
So,
Well, it requires vulnerability. Even as you said, I sent out a survey to 25 people. My stomach just goes, "Ugh," did a little flip flop going, oh, that's a lot of vulnerability there, Dr. John. You only have my
yeah.
greatest respect. And it's hard to do in leadership to put yourself in that position because there is that fear that people are judging your intention and they don't understand your intention. What I find is people are very
Mm-hmm.
forgiving. Once you say, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, that was not my intent. My intent was actually to support what you're doing. And what came out is you're feeling like you got shot down. Now, what do I need to do to make that tweak? But that taking that first step of vulnerably asking for it, the feedback, I just have quite the respect for you for doing that. Well done.
Well, I think I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just had such a desire to learn that I was willing to get my feelings hurt to know the truth.
Yeah.
And because I saw the danger of it, observing
Yeah.
all those other, and I saw some amazing commanders, right? But I
Yeah.
saw the effects of not knowing and
Yeah.
operating in that blind spot. And I was like, I can't let that happen. I can't let
Yeah.
that happen. I need to find out. So, but when I recommend that exercise to other people, I say, think about 6 or 7 people. I don't say,
Ease into it a little bit, huh?
yeah, think about 6 or 7 people that you handpick and, get some easy. Yeah. So, but yeah, that 25 was it was different. It was
Yeah.
different,
Well
but it was
done.
helpful. It was
Wait,
helpful. Yeah.
well, go big or go home, John. Just well done. Well, let's
Well, look,
talk.
you
Yeah,
create a
go ahead.
shortcut. And everyone doesn't need to do that survey now. They just get your book and get some eye openers in your book.
Well, yeah, as you're talking, I think it was a gentle on-ramp to say, how do we talk about the choices we're making daily? And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
we don't even realize it, but what if we put words to it? So for
mm-hmm,
instance, do we want to question or do we want to accuse? And so I
mm-hmm.
used these 7 practices and then chose something that juxtaposed it because knowledge is power. And
Yeah.
understanding that you have a nanosecond to choose, am I going to be defensive with this feedback? Well, of course you're going to feel it for a couple minutes and it's okay, maybe a couple days, whatever it is you needed to get over 25, surveys coming back at you. So I try and normalize that. But you know what? If you stayed in that, that's where you would miss the learning that you needed to do. And so
Mm-hmm,
what you can reach for then is receptivity.
mm-hmm.
And I think helping people understand that both are kind of warring inside of you. But many of us want to do what is the easiest. And it's usually defensiveness, accusing, because it's uncomfortable and we're vulnerable.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
I'm realizing with humanity, which is humanity is so beautiful. They want more than they realize. Nobody feels good walking away feeling defensive. Like, in your gut,
Mm-hmm.
well, that doesn't feel good. Like I didn't learn, they didn't learn,
Hmm.
everybody's mad at each other. I don't want to speak to them again. I mean, we've all done it, myself included, all my fingers pointing back. So I think normalizing that you have a choice to make, it's been this lifeline to people where they've been able to
Hmm.
go, yeah, I actually can be receptive and it's actually not bad or good. It's just human condition. Yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
lean toward being defensive and it's okay. And to your point earlier, how do we offer a little bit of compassion behind the scenes with that? And how do we navigate with that? But then how do we give them something else to reach for? So I guess I want to speak to
Hmm.
that a little bit. What have you found as you're navigating and using gray space as a tool? What have you learned about yourself as a leader and what you're reaching for and what you're choosing to step away from?
Well, one of the things that, in answer to your question of, um, is I saw this when I was talking with my coaching clients,
Mm,
right? And
mhm,
then I began to reflect on myself and where I do this very same thing. And that is that sometimes what is motivating our behavior is what we're running from, what we don't want to be, what we don't want
mm.
to happen, versus what we're running to and what we're trying to create, what we're trying to attain.
Oh, I
And
love that. Hmm.
when the focus, those, yeah, you can have a focus on what you're running from, what you're running to. Depending on what you're focusing on, that determines how you're running,
Mm, love
right? That
that.
determines how
Hmm.
you're running. So if I'm trying to
Mm,
run away from having a bad reputation, running away from accusations, running away from criticism, then there's a lot of fear-based decisions I'm going to be making,
mm,
and I'm going to hear people through that particular lens.
hmm.
And that sets me up to be defensive. That
Hmm.
sets me up to react instead of responding.
Hmm.
On the other hand, if I have an idea of what kind of positive outcomes I want with my team,
Hmm.
with my clients, with my wife, with my kids, then the adjustment I make to my behavior
Mm,
is based more on um, love and respect and honor.
mhm,
Those are the things that motivate my behavior, and I'm
mhm,
more likely to create those positive outcomes.
mm,
So I'm running differently when I'm trying to
mhm,
create honor and respect and trust and love
mhm,
versus me running when I'm trying to protect my image,
mhm.
protect my
Yeah,
reputation,
yeah.
protect my sense of authority at work or
Mhm,
at home. You just run different. And
mhm,
so what you've done with Gray Space is you've put both those options out there.
mhm,
Like, right? You said
mhm,
it's not like you said stop being defensive and stop accusing people. You said no, no,
mhm,
no. You have a choice
mhm,
between questioning or accusing,
mhm,
between constructive communication or destructive.
mhm,
So the fact that you put those choices out there really clear,
mhm,
um, just by naming them,
mhm.
it empowers people because they
Yeah,
can clearly see the choice
yeah,
instead of just running off of their default dysfunction.
yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And have you heard
Yeah,
anyone
yeah.
say, I want to be defensive? I want to be accusatory. Have you heard anyone say that when you give them that
Right.
choice?
Not at all.
Me neither. And yet, talk about the assumptions we make of people. I mean, we're living in a world that's so polarized right now. We think people have
Hmm.
these malicious intent. They want to
Hmm.
accuse me, they want to be defensive. And I'm like, you know what I'm finding about humanity? They're actually really good people. They just don't
Yeah.
understand the choice. And so they almost are living a victim of whatever's coming at them. And going
Hmm.
back to your word earlier of empowerment, you nailed it. How do we empower people to recognize no matter what comes at you, you're completely in the driver's seat and you actually have a choice of how you want to handle it?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I like this approach that you made to the
Mm-hmm.
chapters in your book, because you could have called them anything, really cool chapter titles, but each chapter is a choice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Each chapter is a choice. It's a clear choice. That right there, just from the beginning of the chapter titles is a very significant empowerment move, because at the beginning of every chapter, people go, I have a choice. I can
Mm-hmm.
choose this or I can choose that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to choose the positive things. And so not only does that happen that way, where you're giving people a choice, but you're putting a mirror up in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because then in each one, you're defining what those behaviors look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said you know, your book could have been a shortcut for me instead of sending a survey out to get that feedback. Like your book is such a leadership hack. It is such a leadership hack. Like seriously, you're taking years off people's learning curve if they just read
Yeah.
this book because you're
Yeah.
empowering people through the chapter titles. You have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You have people see themselves, so the self-awareness is there. And then
Mm-hmm.
the practical tips you give on how to do these is like
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how. This is why I'm a big champion of this book, Heather.
Thanks, John.
Seriously,
Thanks so
yeah.
much. Tell us a little bit about, like, when you were reading it. I'd love to hear about how it's impacting you personally as a leader. It's really fun for me to hear how each chapter, there's some that have really hit people differently. And then also
Mhm.
what you're seeing, so internally and then externally, what you're seeing with other people. Tell us a little bit, start with yourself. How is this impacting you?
Yeah, well, because emotional intelligence is it's such a big deal for me. Like
Mhm.
I got into it professionally because how it impacted me personally and professionally.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, one of the contracts I received was because of this statement I made that your book highlights. I said it's my goal for the people in your organization, on your team, to be changed as people,
Mhm.
not to just be changed as a leader. If I just teach leadership skills, then
Mhm.
that means you learn how to act when you're at work.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then that's how we have that gap between people at work and people at home. I said,
Yeah.
that's not my goal. I don't want to teach you how to act at work. I want you as a person to be transformed. When
Mhm.
you experience transformation and growth in these areas, then you're a different person at home and at work.
Mhm.
And you show up differently, authentically in both those spaces.
Mm.
So your one of your main premises for your book is how you live and lead, creating these spaces for
Mhm.
how you live and lead. And
Mhm.
so your approach to these principles being applicable at home and at work,
Mhm.
that's a core value for me to be
Mhm.
the same person,
Right.
right? I was literally talking to my wife just yesterday about how I'm seeing some gaps in how I show up professionally in one place and how I think my
Mhm.
kids might comment about some aspects
Mhm.
of my personality. Like I want to close that gap. I'm not comfortable with that.
Mhm.
I want to close that gap.
Mhm.
If my kids are around, when someone at work or when my clients or a church I go to that I speak at,
Mhm.
if my kids are around and somebody says a compliment to me about
Mm.
my attitude, my personality, whatever, I want my kids to go, yep. I don't want
Yeah.
my kids to go, who are you talking about?
That ain't my dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And and so um And so the self awareness
Mhm.
is a big deal for me. How I show up as a husband, how I show up as a father is a big deal for me. And
Mhm.
so learning how to respond versus reacting, man, trying to apply that principle at home has been a big value for me. And so just coming out of the gate in your book, right? It's boom, it's right there
Yeah.
because I'm trying to learn how to respond better and with my kids, especially when they do things that irritate me or get me upset
Right.
and like looking at where is that really coming from
Mhm.
and reminding myself that I have a choice, not just on how I respond to this, but my kids are learning from me how to do this,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? They're learning from me how to have constructive communication instead of destructive communication.
Mhm.
I'm modeling that for them because I want them to have emotional intelligence. And so the things that you've highlighted in your book about those elements, it it challenges me because there's some
Mhm.
areas where I thought I was doing it pretty good, and then you're like calling me out. I'm like, oh, that's not okay. Okay,
Heather, go home, Heather.
yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that's
Let's
good
close the
though.
book
That's
now. We're
good.
done reading for a while. Well, did you notice who I dedicated it to? I don't know if you noticed that.
Your son, right? Yeah. Was it
Son.
your son?
My
Uh huh.
son.
Uh huh.
And it was the
Mm-hmm.
teenage years we were going. He's 19 now, and we've got a beautiful relationship, but we both talk about it got a little rocky there for a while. And our kids can be our greatest teacher. And I'm like you. I'm like, I don't want to be known for being this amazing leadership coach and consultant. And then my own kid is like, yeah, she won't stay curious with me. She won't stay receptive with me, So it was almost like an act of accountability to the world that says, I'm going to dedicate this to my son, because in the home and as a parent or as a spouse, this is where the rubber meets the road. And to
Mhm.
your point, if our kids can say, yeah, that's who my mom is, that's who my dad is, can't you just feel this? Okay, I'm truly authentic. And
Mhm.
there are little teachers in this world and in this life, and they hold up a mirror to us all the time. So especially as I ended the book, Freedom versus Control, it was a lot of what I was thinking about with him. And of course, I'm using a lot of the examples in my workplace, but I use the word live and lead because I think who you are as a leader is where you're in your living spaces, and who you're in your living spaces is who you are as in your leading spaces. So if they're
Mhm. Mhm.
incongruent, you're not going to, you will not be set up for success. It's that simple. And
Yeah.
thinking about that with my son and writing the book, I'm like, one of the things I had to really look at is freedom versus control. As a mother, I want to make sure that he stays healthy and takes that vitamins and has his jacket and has all his stuff that I think he needs to have. Well, he's 17 and he's done hearing that stuff. Now, what is it really about? Now it's becoming about me trying to control. And I had to
Yeah.
really have that mirror held up to me that says, I don't want my son to feel like there's a controlling power struggle. I want him to feel like his mom is giving him freedom. What that
Mhm.
looks like. And going back to intention, I have the best of intentions. Like, of course I know better. And of course, this is only because I want to keep you healthy. I want to make sure that you're, and I'm going to help
Yeah.
sign you up for this class because I know better. They don't appreciate that quite as much as they're aging, right? And so that to me was a hard look in the mirror of going, this has nothing to do with him. And if you keep hiding behind your intentions as a mother, you're going to destroy this relationship. And you don't want that. You need to step into this and recognize this gets to be about cultivating a field of freedom, both for
Yeah.
him and for me. And that's in the relationship realm. And of course, that's the big myth. We think we can control people. We can't. We might have that really strong awareness in the leadership realm, but as parents, that's where I've seen it hit home in that last one where they're like, I don't really get freedom or control. I'm like, do you have any kids? They're all like, now I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the one of the reasons why it's hard for people to see their controlling tendencies
Mm-hmm.
is because they believe they're doing what's best
Right.
for people to be safe,
Mm-hmm.
whole, healthy, all of
Mm-hmm.
that. They just don't recognize that the method is not necessarily working. So
Yeah.
you're talking about your son. I
Mm-hmm.
have three daughters, and between March and April, they're turning 9, 6, and 4.
My goodness.
And when we talk about freedom and control, oh man, I had to recognize that uh, there was there was a fear there for me behind my control,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like they're too young to know better and to
Right.
handle freedom
Right.
correctly. To make they're not wise enough to make
Mm-hmm.
good choices with that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to control some stuff. I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
called it that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have called my control wisdom
Of course. And great insight.
and protection
Yes.
and love. Like,
Guidance.
yeah, we don't see control for control because
Right.
we dress it up.
Yes.
And but when I got to it, I was having some conversation with my wife about this, who's a parent coach. So
Oh,
there's that.
lovely.
Yeah. So she's been real helpful, helped me reflect and look at some of the heart issues behind there.
Mm-hmm.
That I had a fear of my children growing up
Mm-hmm.
and being like wild and
Mm-hmm.
unwise in their adult years or from teens up
Mm-hmm.
and all this kind of stuff. And because of
Wow.
that, it caused me to show up in a way where I was more controlling than I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
and missing out on some of the joy
Mm-hmm.
of bringing them up.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well said. Yes. Yeah. And even the
And
joy of, for me, I'm on the other end of the spectrum, the joy of adulthood. I really can be
Mm-hmm.
done with these things. That was what he needed in fifth grade. And he did need my guidance and insight. He doesn't need that at 16 and 17. And so
Mm-hmm.
learning how to adjust and adapt the levels of control or guidance that we're giving, when does it become control? When does the guidance shift over into control? That's really good insight that we have to ask ourselves
Mm-hmm.
because our kids are constantly evolving. It's much
Yeah.
easier to see that awareness over in the parenting and then transfer it over in the leadership realm. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A 20 something year old employee versus a 40 something year old employee who's been in the field for 20 plus years and someone who's just fresh out of college. It's different levels of guidance we're going to need, but you got to have that integrity to look at yourself in the mirror and say, how much of this really is about trying to control them? Or even that other practice, I am living more out of fear of how it might
Mm-hmm.
impact my reputation, fear that they might fail on my watch, fear that I'm not
Yeah.
giving them enough versus I need to trust them. I need to trust myself. I need to trust the process. I need to trust that they'll learn from their mistakes. It's
Mm-hmm.
so transferable, whether it's parenting or leadership, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. There's, I mean, sometimes we have some regret or guilt about our own mistakes, and we don't want them to do that. And so
Yeah.
again, there's that avoidance, trying
Yeah.
to run from something, trying to act in a way to prevent certain things from happening. And what I found is that it's tough to create gray space if you make yourself, if you are making self-centered decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking I'm protecting my child from a future of bad decisions, but actually I'm trying to protect myself
Mm,
from having a child who's making bad decisions.
exactly.
Because,
Yes.
like
Yes.
it's about me.
Yes.
So on the one hand, creating great space, it starts with you. It
Mm-hmm.
starts with you. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
look at that, and that's what this book is about. But on the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, there's a difference between being self-aware and self-absorbed, or
Mm.
self-improvement versus self-centeredness.
That
There's a
might be
difference there.
the eighth practice.
Yeah. Okay.
Self-aware versus self-absorbed. Already I'm like, ooh, let's add that into the book. We'll have book number 2, John. Let's make 7 new ones, okay?
I'm down with that. I'm down with that. I, I, part of what your book brings to the surface for me um, is this truth that people's perception of help
Mm,
is different from what I think.
mm-hmm.
What people need to thrive in relationships and communication and all those kind of things, it can be different than what I think that they need. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also part of like the control thing. Like, I think you need this. And you,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about with your son, like, nah, he's beyond that now.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So as he's growing and as my daughters are growing,
Mm-hmm.
what they perceive as help from me
Mm-hmm.
is going to be different as they grow. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've got to be sensitive to that so that I can adapt and adjust as they grow.
Yes. And going back to how you started the conversation, we got to get feedback from them. Is this helping
Mm-hmm.
you or is this hurting you? That
Mm-hmm.
was a simple question
Exactly.
I had to learn to start asking. My intent was always to help, never to hurt, but it wasn't
Right.
helpful. So it began to be this very funny little thing between us. I'm like, is this helpful? And then I had
Mm-hmm.
to listen to the feed. I had to have receptivity. I want to hear, yes, it is, Mom. You're amazing and wonderful. It wasn't always the response I got, John. I had to listen to hear that wasn't helpful. And then I had to say, what would be helpful? And
Mm-hmm.
it's again, you're learning how to get that feedback and receptivity to let go of that control or that fear that we're living with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think our adaptability to that and be able to meet those other people's needs is kind of an other centered, other focused kind of perspective. And it's how can I serve you?
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
I
It's
love
how can I
that.
serve you?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to create a great space, there's a sensitivity you have to have. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what each of these steps is like a measuring,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a measuring step, but also a tool. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of combine both of them. Right? The self-awareness and then and the empowerment right there in each chapter, really succinctly, by the way.
Mm.
Um, it's helping people go, How can I assess people's needs
Mm-hmm.
and then create an atmosphere through my behavior, through my words, my actions, my
Mm-hmm.
attitude, create an atmosphere where they feel safe and
Mm.
honored and valued. How can I do it at home? How can I do it at work? And who do I need to become to be a person who authentically does this?
Mm. Love that.
And and you can't create that gray space for other people if you're living in a world of self condemnation yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
um, how do you carry around that gray
Mm.
space, and how do you give that to yourself so you can give
Yes.
it to other people?
Well said. Which I did want to
Mhm.
ask you that because, I'm thinking about, I'm still going back to your 25 surveys and I'm still working through the chills I'm getting over here. It's like, oh my gosh. It's way to go. But I think I want to just ask that. Like, we've all been there at some point when we're getting the feedback and it is hard. It feels like a gut punch. The vulnerability is just, Brene Brown talks about the shame and the vulnerability that we all have to
Mhm.
navigate through. I love
Mhm.
her research around that. But I think that's what I want to ask you. What do you do? We don't ever want to ignore it and just go, I'm fine. I'm fine. We're not fine. We're melting down or we're scared or we're like feeling like we got caught without our clothes on going, what? I didn't realize this was happening. How do you
Mhm.
navigate that? And what would you tell our people that are listening to it? Because when you see that reflection in the mirror and you're not aware of the fact that you've had food on your face for the last, 5 years or something like that, it's
Mhm.
humiliating, it's embarrassing, it's vulnerable. What are some encouragement you would give to people and leaders that are out there and they're seeing things and hearing things for the first time? How do you navigate that emotional intensity that sometimes comes with that?
I think you have to. The first thing is, before I got all that feedback from people, I had to like psych myself up and get ready. I mean,
Mm,
if you if
yeah.
you imagine if you imagine a boxer in the gym kind of preparing,
Yeah.
and they're throwing punches at the punching bag and stuff, but they're also preparing, like protecting themselves.
Oh,
I did
right.
not know what was going to be said, what was going to happen. So I kind of braced myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in that part of preparing, because I didn't want to be defensive, I didn't want to try to give an explanation for why I
Mm-hmm.
did what I wanted to just hear people.
Mm,
What is your experience of me? That's it. What is your experience of me? And then I'll deal with that. But I had to, what rose to the surface for me was my insecurities, the things I
mm,
was worried about, being worried about, man, the fear of rejection.
mm-hmm.
What if people don't like me? I've invested a lot to be a person that everyone likes and loves and honors and
Mm-hmm.
respects. And what am I going to do when I discover that I have unintentionally hurt somebody? What am I
Mm.
going to do if I discover these things that are wrong about me?
So kind of
I don't
like you
think
had a
everyone's
game
ready to do
plan.
a survey like that.
Yeah, but you had
Yeah,
a bit
yeah.
of a game
I don't think
plan
everyone is.
recognizing that. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me look inward to see if I'm ready for this feedback. Because
Mm.
just because they sent it to me doesn't mean I was ready to read it.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, just I put it
Yeah.
out there, and there were times I was like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have. But I opened it when I was ready to open it. I
Oh, that's
read it
good.
when I was ready to read it
Yeah.
because I wanted it to land. I wanted the feedback to land on good ground. I
Yeah.
wanted the feedback. I wanted my heart to have the soil to receive what people are saying, so that I can actually change, grow,
Mm-hmm.
develop, and be a better leader for them and show up differently. But I was aware of
Mm-hmm.
my defensiveness. I was aware of the potential for me to not be right about myself.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
For there to be some things I believe about myself that people around me do not believe
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
So am I ready to be wrong about myself?
Mm-hmm.
I think I am. Right?
That's a
Is what
great
are
question.
they trying to be mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to be mean to me. So then they're not trying to speak about my identity.
Mm-hmm.
They're just speaking about my impact.
Mm.
So there's a difference between who I am and how I'm impacting people. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are kind of things I process. So I didn't take things personal. I was actually ready to read the feedback and then ready to respond, but then also ready to repair.
Ooh, I love that. Wow,
I
that's
was going to
good.
find some stuff in there. I was going to
Yeah.
find some stuff in there, and I need to be ready to repair and be responsible for if there was some damage that I've done that
Mm-hmm.
was like bad that I need to
Mm-hmm.
own up, and there was. And
Mm-hmm.
because the survey was anonymous, and even the feedback, sometimes if people give a particular scenario, like
Mm-hmm.
who was in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
The feedback was generic, and I thought, you know what? I don't care who gave me
Mm-hmm.
this feedback. I want to apologize, and so my apology was to the whole team of 25 people.
Wow. Wow. Great
Yeah, I
job.
mean, guys, I appreciate you all's feedback, and
Mm-hmm.
it has come to my attention.
Oh, Sean, you're well done. You are practicing what you preach over there. Well done.
Yeah, it has come to my attention that although I intended to be supportive of you all's ideas and you all's thoughts,
Mm,
that I was coming across very, very critical. And I am
mm,
sorry if you felt minimized or diminished. I apologize for that. And I don't want
mm,
to do that going forward. And
mm,
so yeah. So here's what happens. Here's what happens when you do that though.
mm-hmm,
In that room, when as a leader, you apologize to the whole team,
mm,
you are declaring through your public apology,
mm-hmm,
if I believe it's safe enough to do this
mm,
for me,
mm-hmm,
it's safe enough for you to own your stuff too.
mm-hmm,
And if I'm apologizing to you, then that means when you own up to your stuff, no one's here. We're not going to slam you. We're not going
mm-hmm,
to slam you. Um, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't even call that grace space. That was years ago.
mm-hmm,
But that's what happened.
mm,
And it shifted the dynamic. And there was some of that humility that you can talk about there.
mm,
Like, it's like, but I wasn't trying to be humble. I was just trying to be honest. Like, the
mm-hmm,
feedback I got was that some people's feelings were hurt. I wanted to own that and say, guys, I did not mean that at all.
mm-hmm,
I am sorry if you felt this or that. And some things were mentioned in the feedback, right? Feelings. You felt
mm-hmm.
this way. I apologize for that. Not like, I'm sorry you felt offended. No, no.
Right, right,
I'm sorry that I offended you.
right, right.
I'm sorry that I criticized you and
Yeah.
and you felt diminished and things like that. So like owning that, that was that was huge. And I
Wow.
think when you look at like trust and fear, um, part of me wanted to create a safer place there, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like I needed to step my
Mm,
dip my toe in the water first and say,
yeah.
come on in, the water's fine.
Oh, yeah. What a great way to model that. And it makes me think too,
Yeah.
you weren't running toward preserving the image or the ego. You were running toward self growth, learning, curiosity, understanding your impact on people. And so, what I'm hearing, my takeaways I'm listening to is really strong clarity of what you're running toward. I love that idea you brought up earlier in our conversation. And many of us are running toward preserving the image, preserving that we don't make mistakes, preserving that we're strong and stalwart. You are running
Mhm.
toward authentic growth, which requires humility, vulnerability, receptivity, openness to feedback, and making sure you have an accurate perception of your impact on people. And I think that does help. And I love that you brought that up, because if you're too focused on not being a certain type of person, all our energies toward that. And that's what we're running away from all the time. Being able to say,
Mhm.
you know what, I get to choose where I'm going to put my energies and what I'm going to run toward. And I think that
Yeah.
finds that helps us out. So it doesn't paralyze us where we're just feeling very vulnerable and hearing it, to be able to switch really quickly into, oh gosh, that just hurt. And I'm thinking of unsolicited feedback, right? You had time to when you wanted to open it, when you, and I've been on the side where I've
Right.
gotten unsolicited feedback and I've got seconds to respond and the whole room is watching me, and going,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I can feel the gut punch, but I want to reach toward curiosity and understanding and growth.
Hmm.
versus
Hmm.
I'm going to reach for self-preservation or, dodging the question or trying to power up on them. These are things we
Yeah.
do when we get that gut punch that we're not quite prepared for. And I loved your idea of what we're going to be running toward, because if you have that as a really quick kind of a lifeline to grab onto when you get a little bit sucker punched here and there, which we all do in leadership or even in parenting or in our, personal relationships. We're like, oh, wasn't prepared for that feedback from my 13-year-old
Right.
child right now, or my spouse, or my supervisor, or my direct report, or my buddy that we've worked together for 10 years. I had no idea I was doing that. That
Right.
unsolicited feedback, that's where the vulnerability can kick in and can really unnerve us for a little bit. And I think it's that gracious space that we get to offer to
Hmm.
ourselves. And you mentioned this earlier, and you caught on to what I was trying to say is you get to carry it around with you. It's almost like you get to
Hmm.
carry this bubble of grace space around with you, which includes yourself. And so one of the things
Yep.
I reach for when I get my unsolicited feedback that really throws me is, oh, Head, you're not supposed to be perfect. You're not supposed to be perfect. You
Hmm.
get to own where you're changing and growing. And so when I
Yeah.
reach for that, and that's my true belief, it helps me recover a little quicker from the sucker punch or the
Yeah.
vulnerability of it and say, thank you for the feedback and truly mean it, because I really want to learn and grow, or I really want to
Hmm.
make sure that my intentions are matching with my actions. Help me better understand what
Hmm.
just happened here. And it helps you then
Yeah.
get out of that space of fear and vulnerability that we can get a little stuck in sometimes as leaders when we're a little surprised by the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. But and those spontaneous impromptu moments are really tough. And
Mm-hmm.
I think um, one of the things that your book does, though, is it helps people have a premeditated response.
Mm.
Like as you process through these things,
Mm-hmm.
let me put it this way: the way I was able to take my time to prepare for reading the feedback
Mm-hmm.
and prepare my heart for it, so that when I got the feedback, um, and then there was time after between when I got the feedback from when I talked to my staff. I still
Mm-hmm.
worked through, even preparing for that. There were phases.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you have those moments where you can prepare yourself for things,
Mm-hmm.
that helps strengthen that muscle,
Oh, well
so that
said.
in those impromptu moments,
Yes.
you have more to pull from that can create more positive outcomes in there.
Yes.
And even though people might not do it right out of the gate, but you can be more successful as time goes on. Like that's what the progress is about. Like you don't
Yes.
have to be perfect to be powerful. You can
Right.
being powerful
Yeah.
is looking at these growing areas and making
Mm-hmm.
some progress in them and getting better at it. One of
I
the
love
things that
that.
Winston Churchill was really famous for was all these deep, powerful statements he would make in these impromptu, spontaneous interviews. And he said, the key to those statements is that they're not impromptu. I plan for them.
Oh, well said. I see what you're saying. He's been cultivating it,
Yeah,
hasn't he?
that's right. That's right.
Uh-huh.
I anticipate, based on what's happening, I anticipate what kind of questions I'm going to get, what the
Yeah.
interviewers are going to try to stump me, what might they want
Mm-hmm.
to try to say to get me off guard. I anticipate it. It's all predetermined. I've thought through it. So what looks
Mm-hmm.
like it's impromptu to you, I have worked through some things first
Mm.
to
Wow, that's
prepare
good. Yeah.
for that moment. So your book helps people prepare privately for those moments where it can pop up, where they can
Mm-hmm.
respond better now to those impromptu moments this year because of
Yeah.
your book than they did last year. They can
Yeah.
think through some things. They can
Mm-hmm.
evaluate. They've got a clear framework to use in each chapter to evaluate what they want to create and what they don't want and what both of them looks like,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The other challenge I see with helping leaders create grace space and psychological safety is even if they want to create it, they have no vision for what it looks like. So they don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And your book paints the picture of what these
Mm-hmm.
things look like, as well as the tools on how to get there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge.
Yes.
So, um, so the premeditated work,
Mm-hmm.
the private work, where you do you can think through responses in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that work prepares you to better
Mm-hmm.
respond more frequently
Mm-hmm.
in those moments when you do get caught off guard and your kid is
Mm-hmm.
saying something, your spouse is saying something, or you're on Zoom with your team and somebody says something crazy. Now
Yes.
everyone's looking to see what's the leader going to say. You can take a moment and
Yep.
go, okay, how can I have constructive
Yeah.
communication here versus destructive? I'm tempted to do something destructive,
Yeah.
but I don't want to do it. Now that I have a picture, now that I know
Yeah.
constructive is an option,
Mm-hmm.
receptivity is an
Mm-hmm.
option, and have a vision. Your book
Yeah.
gives us a vision for what that is. I can
Yeah.
aim towards that, and that
Right.
empowers me in the moment to choose that. Even if I don't know exactly what to say, I can still make
Exactly.
that choice
Yeah.
in that moment and create a different outcome.
You're right on. It's exactly, and it's came from so much of my experience. And I have been put on the spot a lot in my life. And it honed that muscle for me where I was like, you know what? I don't want to have to try and control the situation. I'm about freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll even use that. I'll say something like, well, I want to make sure that everyone has the freedom to respond in the way they need, but certainly we have to monitor our time constraints here. So I'll use that language. And that's my hope too, is people
Mm-hmm.
feel that they can have a language where, well, I do really want to build trust with you. So it helps build a language for communicating your intentions, but also setting the culture for what you're trying to accomplish in that moment, or even the conflict you might be trying to deal with, or the confrontation that you might be trying to deal with in that moment. To your point, it buys you time. It buys you a couple seconds to go, I don't know how I'm going to respond to this. I'm feeling a little flat on my feet and sucker punch, but I am going to start with what I want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I have
Mm-hmm.
found that
Mm-hmm.
diffuses it like that, because I go,
Yeah.
I don't know where this came from. And I don't know if this guy just has low blood sugar or having a bad day, or he really has a beef with me or what, but I'm going to say,
Right.
here's what I hoped was going to happen. And the funny thing is, people go, oh, that's actually what I want to happen too. Things like, well, I really want us to get to a
Mm-hmm.
win-win here. So it's that operating that receptivity versus I can feel the pull of defensiveness, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
say, here's what I want to happen in this moment. And what that does is it helps the other person join you in that space.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even think of an example where I've had someone say, well, actually, you want receptivity. I want defensiveness. Oh, you really want freedom. Well, I want control. It sets this beautiful space of grace that you're now carrying around with you. And it gives you this incredible empowerment to create the language you want around you,
Yeah.
regardless of how people are going to respond. And
Yeah.
people can respond however they want, because guess what? I'm not going to try and control them. And I'm going to trust the process. And I'm going to trust that people are good
Yeah.
and they're trying.
Yeah.
And they might not have been able to choose the perfect words or the response in that moment, but we're going to give them grace to kind of have a second chance there. And we're not going to take
Mm-hmm.
it personal and be able to and push back on it, and then make it become about our ego or the fact that we don't like that we're being treated that way. And so there's
Mm-hmm.
this whole ability now to navigate really uncomfortable situations, not in a passive way like a doormat, but in a way that says, I know now how to assert what I want to say in this moment. And it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be something that I'm going to be proud of when I leave, regardless of the
Yeah.
outcome. Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we're the ones looking at ourselves in the mirror saying, did I like how I handled that? And
Yeah.
we know when we haven't handled something well, whether it's in the workplace
Right.
or in the home, we know. They don't
Right.
have to give us
Yeah.
feedback. We feel that sick pit in our stomach that, oh, I could have done better. But
Right.
then we kind of chew on that and ruminate on that. And I think, again, this is just a beautiful gift to be able to say, listen, guys, you can recognize what you did that you didn't like. And now you know how to course correct. And so now you just go
Mm-hmm.
back and own it. To your point earlier, you go to apologize or say, I think I could have been more receptive there. I realized I was being defensive. And I heard a president, I was working with an executive team the other day, and I heard her say, I'm feeling myself wanting to become defensive and I don't want to be. And it was just so
Mm-hmm.
powerful for her to say that in the front
Yeah.
of the room and model that to everyone else. And I saw the whole executive team go, it's okay if you're defensive. We understand. Say whatever you need to say. We won't take it personal. So it
Mm-hmm.
diffused the whole situation. It gave her the language that she needed to handle something that was sensitive to her. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable. And then it gave the
Yeah.
grace to everyone else to say, you don't have to get it perfect. We're all
Mm-hmm.
committed to receptivity right now. And
Mm-hmm.
defensiveness is what none of us want. So now
Yep.
we set that intention out there, and it set this culture where it took the pressure out of the room. It took the pressure off the conversation to say some hard things that needed to be said. And the feedback was just It was powerful, it was beautiful, and it was life-changing for the culture of that group and the relationships that needed to happen. And it
Yeah.
starts with modeling it first, which is what you've been saying, and
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. And that's contagious. I mean, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
people talk about how fear is contagious. Well, so is grace.
Yeah.
When you model, what grace space looks like and how to get there, what
Mm-hmm.
it looks like to create it, people, like you're saying, if people want to do right, they want to do good.
Yeah.
And when people see it, there's like it's like inside their spirits go, that's the kind of workplace I want.
Yeah.
That's the kind of words I want to be able to say. That's the kind of
Yeah.
way I want to make people feel.
Yeah.
Um, I was one of my clients I was talking to earlier today, and we're talking about, people, using harsh language or
Mm-hmm.
being disrespectful in the meeting, and what can she do or say to intervene in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people are just unaware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, if that happens, the team is waiting on the leader
Yeah.
to respond.
Yep.
And how the leader responds is what's going to determine if we're moving towards
Mm-hmm.
grace space
Yep.
or fear space,
Exactly. Yeah.
and criticism.
Or shame
And
or blame
so,
space. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing we're talking about is the option to go, um, say, listen, I heard what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you're aware of how
Mm-hmm.
that sounded, but it
Mm-hmm.
came across as this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you take an opportunity to say it a different way?
Mm. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So now you get that person in
Mm-hmm.
front of everyone. You let everyone know what they said is not okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're being held accountable for it. But you're
Mm-hmm.
also letting that person go, man, maybe I didn't. You give them a chance to redo it.
Right. Right.
And that's sometimes what grace looks like. Here's
Yeah.
another chance again.
Yep.
Here's another chance. That didn't come out right. You probably didn't know it. Probably didn't. But here's another chance. Because in this space,
Yeah.
we might not say it right the first time, but we give each other another chance. I mean,
Exactly.
that's,
You're right.
yeah.
You're right on. And even as a leader, and this is where I got all of these, because these are probably all 7 of these, and I call them practices because we have to practice them behind the scenes so we're
Uh-huh.
ready. But,
Yeah.
all of them came from awkward situations, all of them. And so I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this? And saying, I really want to make sure that we ask some good questions. And I just feel like we're starting to move into accusation. Can we shift it more into asking some good questions? It gave me then the
Mhm.
language, how to handle
Language.
the
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
intense conflict that was happening in the room
Yeah.
that was starting to spiral. And we've all been in those meetings where we're like, the leader doesn't know how to take it back. And the leader's trying to give everybody the permission to process, but it's moving into a really negative direction. That's not constructive. So being able to have that language, these all came from these spaces of being able to say, I just want to make sure that we're really building trust here. And it sounds like we're
Mm-hmm.
cultivating some fear. These
Mm-hmm.
all came from me having to step into spaces and deal with really the heart of the issue in the room that we have to as coaches and consultants. Because if we can't deal with the heart of the issue, the team suffers. And we're
Yeah.
paid to
Yeah.
call out, this is what's happening in the room. It's
Yeah.
never about, the selling of the widgets. It's about the emotional intelligence that's swirling around in that room. And all of a sudden,
Mm-hmm.
fear, control, defensiveness is starting to just rule and reign in that room. And so, how we take it back, I thought, well, this is how I deal with it all the time. Why not tell them this is what I'm
Mm-hmm.
watching for, and this is what I'm going to offer you? And every time in the room, they're like, oh, thank God someone gave us a better choice. We could all feel that we were spinning out of control. And I may or may not usually do it with well, it's probably time for a snack break now. Get the blood sugar back up, and then we re-enter with, let's move into a space. Let's create this space of grace around us. And so I think it's just being able to be very upfront with people. Why not tell them kind of like the magic behind the scenes, pull the curtain back and say, this is all
Mm-hmm.
came from conversations and places of just incredible awkwardness or hardness or vulnerability or sadness or shame or fear. This is,
Mm-hmm.
and I have such compassion for people saying, we can do better. And I know you want to do better. Let me give you a couple lifelines here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This has been an amazing conversation. I always love our talks. I do. That's why I
Me
want to get
too.
you on my show. Hey, as we start wrapping up, can you, what would you like to leave our listeners with to encourage them? You gave such a powerful example of it. And I'm just already thinking of just, I don't know, for our book 2 on gray space, we probably have to do something like vulnerability versus shame. But, you modeled this idea of vulnerability is so powerful in the gray space. What would be some encouragement you're giving our leaders that sometimes feel knocked around and unsure and their confidence is waving? And what would you like to say to them?
I think that leadership is hard. It's supposed to be hard. And when you experience it being hard, it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be a leader.
Mm.
And some of the big challenges in giving oneself race is being the first person to do it.
Mm-hmm. Love
Like
that.
some people are trying to lead at home, at work in ways that they weren't led.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a picture of it, a vision for it. They
Mm-hmm.
feel in their heart what they want to do and how they want to be, but there's not a picture for it. And they don't know how to give grace to themselves. So they don't know how to give it to other people. Or some are really good at giving grace to other people and not themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or really good at giving grace to themselves and not other people.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be a journey, and growth is necessary. So embracing the opportunities for growth is not weakness. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of power. And strength and power can look different than how you've seen it before, how you've experienced it before. And so I think that's maybe a first step or a gateway to going, you know what? I'm not off. I'm not bad. I'm not wrong. I am supposed to do what I'm doing. I'm living out this purpose or this call. It's supposed to be hard. And in the midst of my imperfections, amazing things are still happening. Good things are still happening. And so maybe that's a first step for grace for some people to look back and celebrate your wins. Don't be so focused on what's not working or where you need to grow that you not take a step back and look at where you came from.
Love that.
And to be able to celebrate the wins of your journey, celebrate your accomplishments. That's not being prideful. That's being aware. And I think that can help people have a better framework for embracing the growth opportunities, as well as embracing the strength, the evidence of their strength.
Love that.
It's a balance. It's a balance.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. John. I love that parting advice, even just the idea of strength and power. It's been so helpful for me personally, both as your colleague and friend, just to hear some of the insights and even just hear how you've made application for your own gray space. And thank you for everything you're modeling to our world. Keep doing it. We need good leaders out there. Keep apologizing, huh? That'll probably be my tagline. Keep apologizing. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We had such a great time today. And obviously, we are all stepping into this life that we're made for. But isn't it nice to have a little bit of support along the way? If you want to find out more about the life that you're made for, come find me at heatherpenny.com. Go ahead and subscribe. Give us a review. That really helps us out and helps spread the word. You get to step into the life that you're made for. Cheering you on.